Hey friends, how's it going? The movie kicks off with Drew and his girlfriend Hannah driving down a quiet road to Drew's ancestral mansion. Tonight is special. His father, Charles Abernathy, a billionaire tycoon, has just turned 75, and for the first time in 2 years, Charles has called all his children home. Inside, we're introduced to the rest of the family, the ambitious twins, Madeline and CJ, both CEOs of billion-dollar companies, and Cami, the youngest, a flashy social media influencer. From the cold glances and fake smiles, it's clear this reunion is less about love and more about old grudges. The head of security, Miles, ushers them inside. Strangely, the mansion is empty. Charles had dismissed all his staff for the night. He wanted this evening to be just him and his children. When he greets them, he's surprised to see Hannah tagging along, since the invitation clearly said family only. But Hannah laughs it off, admitting she crashed the party because she didn't want to miss his big birthday, especially since she and Drew had prepared a surprise gift. That's when Charles drops a bombshell. He calmly announces that he won't survive the night. Someone, he claims, is coming to kill him before midnight. That's why he locked down the house and sent everyone else away. Charles confesses that during his rise to power, he made enemies. Ruthless enemies. He admits he took shortcuts, betrayed people, and those sins have finally come back to haunt him. His plea to his children is simple: protect me tonight, so I can live to see tomorrow. And to make things even more complicated, Charles pulls out his will. It states that if he survives until morning, his massive fortune will be divided equally among the children, but if he dies tonight, every last cent goes to the Abernathy Foundation. The siblings sit there, stunned. None of them saw this coming. Was their father losing his mind? Or was this some twisted game to test their loyalty? Charles had already prepared for tonight. Every window in the mansion was reinforced with bulletproof glass, and every door sealed shut. No one could get in or out. Then, turning to Hannah, he firmly told her to leave. This was family business, but Hannah refused. If there was even the slightest chance Charles was telling the truth, she wasn't going to sit this out. CJ and Madeline weren't buying it. To them, this was just another one of their father's dramatic stunts, a desperate attempt to bring the family together before he died. But Hannah wasn't so sure. Even if there was just a 1% chance someone was coming for him tonight, wasn't it worth taking seriously? Drew and Cami agreed. They decided to check the house for anything suspicious, while the twins rolled their eyes and retreated to their rooms. Cami started in the wine cellar, where the family's collection of rare bottles was kept. Of course, instead of investigating, she was more interested in sampling the goods. Meanwhile, Drew showed Hannah the antique room, where Charles kept his collection of strange artifacts. Back in the cellar, Cami suddenly froze. A low growl echoed through the darkness. She could feel it. Someone or something was watching her. Panicked, she rushed for the door, but it wouldn't budge. From the other side, CJ laughed, locking her in as a cruel prank. What he didn't see was the shadow moving across the wall behind her. Maybe Charles wasn't so crazy after all. Upstairs, Drew and Hannah confronted Charles. "What's really going on?" they asked. But Charles only repeated himself. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you." Elsewhere, CJ was alone in the game room, distracting himself with a game of pool. But when his glass tipped over on its own, he froze. Even worse, the scattered balls on the table mysteriously rearranged themselves into a perfect formation. And while all of this was happening, Cami was busy making reels on her phone, turning the eerie situation into content for her followers. But mid-recording, she spotted a dark figure in the background. Heart racing, she spun around. Nothing. Relieved, she laughed it off and turned back to the camera. That's when someone crept up from behind and shoved her straight into the pool. Her phone slipped from her hand, sinking to the bottom as she struggled in the water. Moments later, her body floated to the surface, lifeless. Madeline soon joined CJ in the game room, and instead of being shaken by the strange events, she started scheming. She suggested they use their father's supposed mental breakdown as a chance for a hostile takeover of the empire, even citing another corporate family who had done the exact same thing. But Drew and Hannah weren't paying attention to their plotting. They were worried. Cami had been gone far too long. The group split up to search, and soon their fears came true. They found her body floating in the pool. The sight left everyone shaken. CJ blamed himself, saying as the eldest he should have been watching out for her instead of playing games of power. But Madeline brushed it off as a tragic accident, though her eyes quickly shifted toward Hannah. She was new to the family after all. What if she and Drew had killed Cammy to secure a bigger slice of the inheritance? That accusation enraged Drew, who fired back, blaming the twins for plotting against everyone else. Tension rose, voices clashed, until Hannah cut in, asking the one question no one wanted to consider. What if the killer wasn't one of them at all? What if someone or something was already inside the house? When they informed Charles of Cammy's death, he was heartbroken, but still refused to open his door. Instead, he warned them that things would only get worse as midnight approached. Then came the revelation. The thing hunting him wasn't human. Years ago, he had made a deal that cost someone their life, and now, the spirit of that person had come to collect. To make matters even more twisted, Charles altered his will on the spot. Cammy's share of $2 billion would now go to Hannah for choosing to stay and stand by him. This pushed the twins over the edge. To them, it all looked like a setup. CJ, furious, grabbed a gun, locked Charles inside the library for his own safety, and stormed off in disgust. Meanwhile, Drew and Hannah insisted they needed to search for this so-called spirit before it killed again. But CJ wasn't having it. He was convinced now more than ever that Hannah was playing them all. To the twins, she would always be an outsider, someone unworthy of their family, their name, and definitely their fortune. As Drew and Hannah searched, they realized Cammy's body was missing. Someone had dragged it away. Hannah freaked out and tried to escape, smashing the windows, but they wouldn't break. Drew stopped her, saying there was another way through the antique room. Meanwhile, Madeline felt a ghostly presence in her room, even seeing Cammy's image. Later, she told CJ about a boy she once loved, but Charles rejected. He never objected to Hannah though, which made the twins believe Drew and Hannah were replacing them. Together, they decided to get rid of them. Back in the antique room, Drew and Hannah were surrounded by Charles's collection of statues, artifacts, and paintings. Drew explained how his mother had always warned Charles that these cursed objects would one day come back to haunt him. To avoid attention, Charles even built a private elevator just to bring them inside. When Hannah tried the elevator, she was crushed by an invisible force until Drew pulled her out. Suddenly, all the statues turned to face them, the lights cut out, and objects crashed down. In the chaos, they caught a glimpse of the ghost. Panicked, they bolted toward Charles's room, hearing frantic knocks from behind the door. When they spotted the vault open, they assumed their father had gone inside for safety. Rushing in after him, they realized too late it was a trap. CJ slammed the door shut and locked it from outside. The vault was airtight, fitted with an exhaust system. Slowly, the oxygen would run out. CJ's plan was simple and cruel. Let Drew and Hannah suffocate to death inside. As the twins breathed a sigh of relief, a sudden knock echoed through the hall, their father's knock. But when they turned, they saw a dark shadow trailing them. Madeline stepped forward to check, only to see footprints appearing, slowly walking toward her. Before she could react, an invisible force gripped her throat, lifting her into the air and dragging her away. CJ watched in horror and chased after her. Moments later, he found Madeline in her room, standing before Cammy's portrait, blood dripping from the painting's face. Then, from that portrait, an evil figure emerged, a twisted version of Cammy herself. It lunged at Madeline. CJ drew his gun, but in his panic, the shot struck Madeline instead. She collapsed, lifeless, as CJ screamed in shock. Desperate to save her, he rushed to her side, but her body vanished right before his eyes. Now truly terrified, CJ realized he wasn't just fighting shadows, he was fighting his own mistakes. Shaken, he ran to the vault and freed Drew and Hannah, who were barely clinging to consciousness after nearly suffocating inside. They thanked him, unaware he was the one who had trapped them there in the first place. Guilt-ridden, CJ handed them the responsibility of solving this nightmare, while he prepared to face the entity himself, with only one bullet left. But the spirit was clever. Instead of confronting him directly, it turned its attention to Drew and Hannah, forcing them to run for their lives. They bolted into a locked room, only to discover a hidden chamber within. Inside were shelves of occult relics, ritual books, and summoning spells. Hannah quickly pieced it together. Charles had struck a deal with something far darker than anyone imagined. Meanwhile, the entity cornered CJ, driving him to the top of the mansion. In despair, he leapt, only to be caught by the spirit itself. Shifting into Madeline's form, it drained the last of his life away. As midnight drew closer, the demon grew stronger, hunting Drew and Hannah relentlessly. They finally broke into Charles's room, demanding answers, and at last, Charles revealed the truth. Generations ago, the Abernathys were powerful, but by his father's time, the fortune was gone, wiped out by scams and failure. To claw his way back from poverty, Charles made a deal with the demon of greed, Mammon. In exchange for unimaginable wealth, Mammon would claim Charles's soul on his 75th birthday. And now, the debt was due. At first, Charles seemed satisfied with what he had. But after witnessing his wife's death, something darker crept in: greed, not for wealth, but for legacy. He wanted his name carved into history, remembered for eternity. And so, he struck a new bargain with the demon, his bloodline, in exchange for his own life. That's why he had gathered his children that night. That's why the demon was slaughtering them one by one. They weren't there for a reunion. They were there to die for him. Drew, who thought he knew his father better than anyone, was crushed by this revelation. But before he could process it, Charles pulled out his gun and, without hesitation, shot his own son point blank. Drew collapsed instantly. Hannah's scream echoed through the house, raw and broken. She couldn't believe what she had just seen. Charles coldly muttered, "I warned you to leave the house, but you chose to stay." Then, like a man possessed, he raised his gun at her too. Hannah bolted, barely escaping his shot. She stumbled outside, hands shaking, and spotted CJ's discarded gun. One bullet left. When Charles came charging at her, she didn't hesitate. She fired. The bullet hit him, but it was already past midnight. The deal was broken. Breathing heavily, Hannah stared him down, and with tears streaming, whispered the truth Charles never knew. She was carrying Drew's child. The Abernathy bloodline wasn't ending tonight. Drew had wanted to tell his father as a birthday gift, but fate twisted it into tragedy. With the contract broken, the demon came to collect what was owed. Charles's body writhed as the creature claimed him. His screams filled in the night. In the end, his greed had damned him. By morning, the head of security returned and unlocked the door. Hannah walked out of that cursed house, alone. She got into the same car they had arrived in, and quietly told the driver, "Take me home." She had lost everything. Drew, the future she dreamed of, and the family she thought she could be a part of. None of the fortune, the mansion, or the Abernathy name mattered to her. All she ever wanted was Drew, and just like that, the story ends. If you enjoyed this recap, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.